Welcome to the DeVore Fidelity YouTube channel. Today's video is going to be another little piece of my family history. A couple of weeks ago I did a video and I talked about my grandfather, who was an artist, and I talked about one of his paintings that I have hanging on the walls here in Monkeyhaus. And I also mentioned that he was married and that he had met his wife at art school in the 1930s. And I mentioned that she was a pianist as well as an artist. She was a pianist and a composer. Today, all day, I have been doing something really fascinating to me, and I wanted to share it in a video. Today, I have been transferring old tapes, cassettes and reel-to-reels, to digital. And these are old tapes of my grandmother playing piano and playing her compositions. And I have never heard these tapes. I've heard some of my grandmother's compositions when my mom would play them, and occasionally I would hear my grandmother playing them at her house when we would visit, but really not very many. And she did compose throughout her whole life. It turns out she was actually more interested in composition and music than she was in art, but the reason she went to RISD, the reason she went to art school instead of going to music school, is because she got a full scholarship to the Rhode Island School of Design from a community group in her hometown. When she graduated, she did far more music than she did art, even though she did have talent as a portrait painter and as an artist. The reason I've been digitizing these tapes today is because we were contacted recently by an old family friend who is a radio DJ and has a radio show in the Netherlands. She likes to play a lot of female composers, and she knew that my grandmother had composed music. And she asked if there was any recordings of any of my grandmother's compositions. And so my Aunt Lori found a box of tapes, a couple of cassettes, pretty low-end cassettes, little Scotch 60-minute tapes, and a couple of reel-to-reels, an audio tape and a Scotch. Again, really sort of entry-level media. But I have to say, it was an amazing experience playing this stuff. At least 90% of this stuff I had never heard. Most of them are solo piano because she didn't have access to an orchestra, and she didn't have access to the modern version of an orchestra for the solitary composer, which is synthesized or sampled strings. She had a piano in her house, and so she would compose on the piano and then she would record them as she composed them. And the whole thing today was an incredible treat. It was like visiting with my grandmother, but it was like visiting my grandmother in the 60s or in the 70s, when she was not the really elderly woman that I knew a couple of decades ago when I last saw her. And I got insight into who she was in a way that I didn't before. You know, my relationship with my grandparents, I was much closer to my grandfather growing up because I was the boy in the family who was the artist. And so we would go to visit them, and I would go and draw with Gramps and do etchings and use his printing press, while my sister and my mom would hang out with my grandmother. And so I sort of missed a huge chunk of that. And so playing these tapes really fleshed out a lot of what I know and how I feel about my grandmother. It was a real treat, very special kind of thing. And I just really wanted to share that with you guys. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you very much for joining me, and I'll see you guys at the next one. Thanks. Bye.
you.